The first frame fades up from black to a smear of white nothingness. A horizonless expanse that looks, for one comforting heartbeat, like the historical Arctic, until the camera pulls backward and the curvature of a transparent roof intrudes at the edges of the scene. A soft hydraulic hiss accompanies the movement, condensation beads where warm interior air meets cryogenic glass. As the lens continues its slow retreat, we see that the ice field below is little more than a skating rink shallow plate of desalinated water. Flash frozen hourly by pipes embedded beneath. Above, 50 meters overhead, strobes the logo of Borealis Biodome Systems in looping holographic text. Witness tomorrow's wilderness. A narrator speaks with the clipped neutrality of documentary voiceover, yet there's a tremor under the consonants. In 2050, the last living polar bear on Earth occupies a habitat just 4 square kilometers in size. Chilled by a fusion reactor and monitored by more sensors than the International Space Station. Her name is Atka, an Inuit word for guardian of the frozen. Some say she is salvation. Others, proof of hubris. The camera glides along an elevated catwalk lined with shatterproof glass. Below, Atka lumbers across the ersatz ice pan, her breath swirling in the supercooled air like wisps of cigarette smoke. Even through the buffer of triple glazing, she feels colossal. Nearly 700 kilos of bone and muscle bleached the color of seafoam. She sniffs at a vent where automated feeders once dispensed Arctic char. The machine remains silent. Feeding time is controlled by algorithms tuned to mimic the erratic success of wild hunts. Part of a perpetual behavioral enrichment protocol designed by the University of Alaska's Extinct Species Psychology Department. She heaves a low chuff and moves on. Cut to an interview cornered in the dome's access vestibule. Its acoustic panels vibrating faintly with the hum of refrigeration turbines. Dr. Madeline Kane, chief veterinarian, 43, ponytail threaded with frost, adjusts her parka zipper and stares just off camera as she chooses her words. I signed up because I believed Biome Dome 1 would buy us time. A genetic bridge, you know? Cryo-bank embryos until we could rewild. But rewild where? The 2043 melt left no multi-year ice north of Ellesmere. By 46, even Hudson Bay winter ice quit forming. There's nowhere to send her home to. A montage unspools. Satellite composites showing the decadal retreat of sea ice. Grainy drone footage of the final wild male near Novaya Zemlya. Hide riddled with tick scars. Muzzle skeletal. Game warden bodycam capturing his collapse in 2041. Atka and that male, codenamed Kalik, shared the dome for 1 year. Long enough to record 12 courtship displays, 3 brief matings, and 0 viable embryos. Some whispered that the fertility drugs could not outrun the chronic stress of captivity. Others blamed the unstable photons of artificial aurora that flicker across the roof each night. A psychological consolation prize for visitors. The narrator returns. 87,000 daily visitors watched Kalik and Atka's courtship live on the Ark stream feed. When Kalik died of renal failure, public grief briefly eclipsed every trending tag except the Cascadia Fire Complex. Borealis stock dipped 9 points before rebounding on merch sales. Inside the staff canteen, painted a soothing Pantone called Permafrost Whisper. Environmental ethicist Dr. Victor Chen nurses reconstituted coffee. He scrolls a tablet showing a comment thread 600k posts deep. Let her go, prisoner of ice, better than extinction. Chen sighs. I lecture about species dignity. The counter-argument is always the same, extinction's worse. Right? But ask yourself, if the price of preventing extinction is perpetual zoohood. Neon sponsorships. Influencer meet and greets through bulletproof glass. Do we preserve the bear or a taxidermy idea of her? Cutaway. A weekend crowd in pastel puffer jackets pressing against railings. Phones raised. A child's voice shrills in vlog excitement. She's right there. Dad, the last one. Atka, 23 years old as the project itself, paces a concrete perimeter disguised with resin snowbanks. Her paw pads are cracked from decades walking synthetic surfaces. A rubberized iceberg hosts embedded treadmills to simulate kilometer-long treks. But research logs show she rarely bothers anymore. The enclosure AI increases storm intensity. dimming roof panels and blasting 40-knot gusts scented with diluted seal oils. Trying to rekindle instinct, Atka simply lies down, massive head resting on forepaws. Yellow eyes half-lidded. Evening cycle. Lights drop to twilight mode tinted indigo. Overhead, a 16K projection system splashes a time-compressed aurora across the vault. Atka's ears twitch for 5, maybe 6 seconds. She follows the phantom glow, then turns away, retreating to the holding den whose floor coils radiate a gentle heat. A technician notes the behavior on a tablet. Aurora response latency decreasing. Suggest revisiting enrichment schedule. We move to the genetics wing. Sterile as an orbital lab. Cryo doers line a hallway. Each canister labeled Ors Mar F1 F236. Inside, gametes from long-dead bears. A fraction degraded by the blackout of 44 when wildfires cut power to the peninsula for 15 days. Dr. Kane taps a cryotube with gloved knuckle. We could create a clone. We could create 100 clones. But without an Arctic, what's the point? 100 Atkas pacing 100 domes? In an adjacent studio, holographic designers choreograph Atka's digital twin for Borealis educational VR packages. They tweak fur translucency so that virtual cubs, projected with planned gene editing success, look photogenic under purchasable auroral skins. A producer insists the pink variant sells better in Southeast Asian markets. The film shifts tone. Archival reels of 2020's protests. Placards reading "No bear biosphere, save ice not cages." A voiceover of activist Kalik Cruz, no relation to Kalik, recorded before his disappearance in the 2048 Westfjord raids. A zoo, no matter how high-tech, is a coffin with climate control. Counterpoint from Borealis CEO Jada Reynolds at a shareholders Q&A. Ethics evolve. Once, species rescue meant freezer jars. Now it means immersive arcs funded by ticket sales. Atka is an ambassador for planetary repair. The narrator poses a slowing litany of questions. Is a single living specimen better than none? Does a life engineered for education justify captivity? At what threshold does a species become an idea preserved for human feelings rather than for itself? One dawn. Dome humidity spikes. A refrigeration valve sticks half open. Alarms chirp. Staff scramble in thermal suits to vent heat. For 78 minutes the ambient temperature inside rises to 4 degrees Celsius. Atka doesn't pant, her thermal regulation still robust, but she refuses food that afternoon. Dr. Kane sedates her for a blood panel. Cortisol quadrupled. White cell count elevated. A press release spins the episode as routine maintenance. But the camera lingers on Kane washing a smear of blood from her sleeve. Whispering, how many fail-safes until one fails finally? The third act follows 3 parallel timelines. Atka in the present, days measured by enrichment tasks. Medical checks. Viral livestream flashes of #Guardian of the Frozen. A speculative sequence of wild ancestors, 19th century footage colorized. Bears sprawled on pack ice stretching to the horizon. A world mythic and unreachable. A projected future 2075. Rendered in animation. New domes glitter at global theme parks. Each hosting designer megafauna, Pleistocene Park, Smilodons pacing neon savannas. Dwarf mammoths under leads. In a VIP lounge. Children sip algae milkshakes while a robotic docent repeats Silolux legend stripped of grief. Polished into branded bedtime calm. Back in 2050 the film closes on an unscheduled blackout drill. The dome's roof iris shutters open to raw sky. For the first time in years natural stars blaze overhead. Cold seeps in. The fusion chillers cycle off safe mode. In the brief darkness Atka raises her massive head and inhales the scent of real wind blowing across the bay outside. A single snowflake lands on her nose. Genuine, not carbon dioxide laser-cooled precipitation. And for an instant something flares in her eyes that looks like recognition. The shutters close. Lights return. Systems reboot. But the audience, and maybe Atka herself, has felt the weight of the question solidify. How thin is the membrane between sanctuary and prison? Between salvation and a slow-motion taxidermy? In the final shot, the camera backs away down the visitor causeway. Atka stands alone at the farthest edge of her world. A pale colossus framed by reinforced glass and corporate insignia. Above her, projected Aurora's pulse to pre-programmed rhythm, forever chasing the unreachable memory of a sky that once danced for her kind without walls, without watchers, and without the need for our conflicted mercy. Silence clung to the corridors long after the shutters closed again. Engineers moved like ghosts beneath the vaulted roof, their tablet screens throwing jittery pools of light onto steel catwalks. Atka had padded back to her den, agitation simmering just beneath the slow sway of her shoulders. Inside the staff command room, the incident report scrolled across a holographic dashboard: airlock safety seal failure. Auto iris engaged. There was no note field for the taste of wild snow on a captive bear's tongue, or for the way the technicians stared at their gloved hands afterward, as if each carried a shard of trespass no solvent could wash away. The film's second movement begins here, in the raw, uneasy half-day that follows the blackout drill, with fracture lines spreading through a project built to be seamless. The camera hovers at ceiling level over a meeting table where the crisis debrief is in progress. Borealis Operations Chief Henrik Nyman scrolls through procedural diagrams, voice clipped, eyes fixed on metrics rather than faces. Across from him Dr. Madeleine Kane sits rigid, arms folded, her medical tunic streaked with Atka's post-sedation blood sample. A bioethicist dial-in from Zurich, a consultant hired to keep shareholder risk low, suggests wording for the press. Frame it as a successful redundancy check. The tinny voice advises. Highlight that Atka never dropped below optimal core temperature. Kane's jaw flexes, but she says nothing. The screen follows her instead. Down back corridors lit by sodium lamps. To the quarantine wing where aged enrichment props gather dust. A hollow iceberg module retired because its coolant lines leaked ozone-eating refrigerant. A kilometer-long treadmill belt cracked at the weld because Atka's mass exceeded early tolerance estimates. Kane stops beside the treadmill, runs a finger along its surface, and lifts a strand of white fur caught in a splice seam. She pockets it, almost unconsciously. Cut to an exterior establishing shot. The biome dome rising out of tundra like a glass glacier calved from a warmer future. Around it sprawls the Greywater Refugee Zone, a sprawl of emergency modular housing established after the 2047 wildfire season rendered 3 coastal communities unlivable. The proximity is intentional. Borealis gets tax credits for employing climate refugees. In ground-level interviews residents describe the dome with a cocktail of resentment and pride. All that fusion power making ice for one animal while we ration heat. A woman mutters, yet still points her child's attention to the billboard streaming Atka Cam. The feed's soft pastel interface carries a banner ad. Shop the last polar bear winter collection. Back inside, new tensions ripple. Data scientists monitor Atka's biomarkers, elevated ACTH, disrupted sleep cycle waveforms. They prescribe algorithmic interventions. Extend dusk phase by 30 minutes. Blend fresh orange essential oil into the air supply. A scent test shows polar bears find citrus novel but non-aversive. None of it addresses the central spike in her cortisol curve that coincides exactly with the blackout window. Kane calls an emergency husbandry conference. She tasted something real, she insists. She knows the difference now. When an enrichment specialist counters that bears cannot conceptualize captivity in the human sense. Kane snaps. Then explain why her locomotion dropped 27% in 48 hours. Silence. The specialist nods, throat working. A parallel storyline unfolds in broadcast studios around the world. The blackout clip, 40 seconds of Atka under open stars, captured by a backup security camera, leaks onto social net. It goes viral in 4 hours. Viewers freeze frame the single snowflake landing on her nose. Digital artists loop it, overlaying piano chords and tear-jerking captions. Comment wars ignite. Let her feel the real sky versus that sky killed her species. An open-source coalition of climate activists, Terra Wave, seizes momentum. They publish a manifesto demanding Borealis sunset the Ark, redirecting its fusion output to desal plants for thaw-season droughts. A countdown clock on their site ends in 6 days. Global action for Atka. Through shoulder-mounted Steadicam we follow 2 junior keepers, Yuli Moreno and Anik Oshuali, on their midnight rounds. Yuli reads headline scrolls on her wrist display. Anik mutters a traditional prayer in Inuvialuq tune asking Kulit Naktik, the northern lights, to soften humankind's noise so the bear may sleep. Their route passes the den viewport. Atka lies motionless, but she opens one dark amber eye as the keepers pass. The eye's reflection catches the camera's infrared, flaring like a warning beacon. Dawn again, edge-to-edge pink. Atka refuses seal oil popsicle enrichment. Instead she scrapes the den's steel threshold until sparks fly. Then sits on her haunches, panting in short bursts, a stress displacement never recorded before. Kane authorizes a mild anxiolytic delivered via pneumatic dart. The tranquilizer takes hold, but Atka fights its drag. The camera closes on her face as eyelids droop, inside each pupil. The matte reflection of the transparent roof, a prison ceiling wearing the costume of sky. Mid-afternoon press conference. CEO Jada Reynolds stands beneath an art-directioned backdrop of polar bear cubs frolicking on pixelated ice. She announces Project Horizon, a partnership with orbital shade array startup Cirrus X. The tech would deploy kilometer-wide mirrors at L1 to slow Arctic Ocean heat gain, theoretically rebuilding seasonal ice by 2065, thus laying the groundwork to release future polar generations. Reporters lob questions about cost, power politics, and Atka's degrading welfare scores. Reynolds smiles, invokes hope 17 times, never once says the word zoo. That evening, Terra Wave hack screens across the visitor promenade. Holographic ads glitch into a looping message. The last bear deserves a last sunset, power down. The feed splices footage of the blackout snowflake. Overlays a countdown now at 41 hours 23 minutes and 9 seconds. Dome security initiates lockdown protocol. Visitors ushered to shuttles, staff badges restricted. In a dim maintenance corridor, Anik meets Kane beside a storage hatch. He confesses he tipped Terra Wave about the open sky window. Just wanted the world to see her under real stars once. He says, Kane's first instinct is fury, her second, despair. She asks if Terra Wave plans violence. Anik shakes his head. They want a global pause. Force the board to choose between a dark dome and a bear who's already dying inside glass. Kane's breath fogs. She realizes either outcome, perpetual captivity or uncontrolled shutdown, could kill Atka faster than the world's attention span. The film decelerates into a reflective montage. Atka as cub in 2030 rehabilitation footage. Rolling in powdered snow on Baffin Bay, engineers welding dome trusses under auroral glow. Present-day Atka curling her cracked paws. Over this, the narrator offers a litany not of answers but of stakes. If we dismantle the dome, she lasts perhaps 2-3 weeks in an outside climate that peaks at 15 Celsius by August. If we keep her here, she could live 5 more years, long enough for a CRISPR embryo to gestate inside a surrogate grizzly. Long enough for a mirror array to maybe shade an ice-free pole. Long enough for us to invent a new dilemma. On -2 day, the hack escalates. Fusion power throttles to conservation mode. Dome temperature ascends. Condensation rains from the ceiling. Atka paces in visible discomfort. Her coat, meant for -20, grows slick with meltwater. Emergency vents blast refrigerated mist. Humidity spikes anyway. Kane storms the central server bay, confronting the cybersecurity chief who's furiously purging malware. Overload breakers trip in a lightning arc. Screens strobe. The biome's aurora projector shorts out, leaving the roof clear polycarbonate. Naked to stars just beginning to form in the purple dusk. A security drone passes the bear habitat and finds Atka pressed against the observation glass. Sides heaving. For 3 beats she stares directly into the lens. Then she rears, slams both forepaws onto the wall. Hairline cracks spiderweb across the first pane, cosmetic layer only. But the noise echoes through empty promenades like a rifle shot. Kane hears it, sprints. She arrives to find Atka still upright. Panting, Kane touches her own chest. Almost mirroring. Over loudspeaker she orders sedation darts readied but then hesitates. Outside temperature is a mere -2 now. Lethal exposure risk minimal. The glass shows fractures like frost patterns. Behind them, the real twilight sky glows. Kane keys open the secondary gate. A blast of moist air rushes into the enclosure. Atka swings her head. Slow. Calculating. The two beings, apex predator, apex caretaker, regard each other across 10 meters of synthetic snow. Kane whispers not to Atka but to herself. "It's your ice, not ours." Then she withdraws, sealing the gate behind her, but leaves the manual latch unarmed. Terawive's countdown reaches 0 at 3:13 local. Instead of a catastrophic shutdown, code injects a single command: iris open. The roof petals retract fully. Stars roar into view, more numerous than any dome projector ever dared replicate. Frost crystals flash freeze in sudden cold cascade. Air plunges to -12 within minutes. Fans whirl futilely trying to regain climate control. Atka lifts her snout, sniffing at the real polar night pouring in. She looses a sound, half roar, half something softer, a note of unprogrammed memory. Then, with surprising grace, she scales the resin rockwork, leaps a security trench, and scrambles out onto the perimeter catwalk. Alarms bleat. No personnel remain inside. Exterior drones track the white shadow moving across the glass expanse toward a service hatch inadvertently blown in by pressure change. She squeezes through, emerges onto bare tundra dusted with hoarfrost. For the first time since 2035, a polar bear walks unrestrained beneath open sky. The last sequence unfolds almost in real time. Atka trundles toward the bay. Guided by instincts older than every algorithm combined, she pauses atop a knoll where patches of permafrost still cling, looks back once at the dome's glimmering shell, now glittering under emergency strobes like a wounded snow globe. Then she ambles onward, disappearing beyond a drift. The drone holds the shot until her outline merges with night. Cut to global feeds erupting. Some celebrate the Great Release. Others condemn eco-terror. Markets buckle. Lawsuits draft themselves. But the film leaves those debates off-screen. Instead, dawn again, pale gold over a glass roof, spider cracked but holding. Kane wanders the catwalk scanning for tracks she knows have already filled with drifting snow. She stops, stoops, retrieves a single tuft of white fur snagged on torn insulation, holds it to the rising light. For a second it glows faint green, a borrowed shimmer from auroras fading west. Voiceover, subdued. Ethics rarely grant clean victories. Atka may die alone. Weeks or days from now, she may adapt. Surprising every predictive model, she may be the last of her genome to feel unfiltered starlight on her face. But in that fragile hour between captivity and oblivion, she became her own again. Whether that justifies the risk, or condemns us for waiting so long, belongs to the ledger future historians will keep on our behalf. Final frames. Arctic shoreline. Late summer 2050. Ice rubble scarce. Water the color of pewter. Camera pans low, on the far margin. A white dot negotiates a kelp-strewn beach. The lens zooms just enough to catch a distinctive scar on the left shoulder. Atka's biopsy mark. She pauses, raises her head at something unseen. Perhaps a phantom scent of pack ice that will never return. The screen fades to black before outcome intrudes, leaving only the pulse of surf and one unanswered question. Stark in silent text. If hope means walls of glass, what name do we give the wind? Winter's second sunrise of the season smolders low on the edge of a pewter sea. Its weak warmth spilling across water that should, by the old calendars, be locked in armor. A light snow drifts horizontally, small crystals skittering like nervous insects. And in that snow a single line of pawprints arcs along the shoreline toward a distant headland where broken permafrost butts against mud-brown cliffs. A reconnaissance drone, one of the half-dozen retasked from tourism marketing to silent tracking, hovers 100 meters overhead. Lens shivering in the wind. It does not zoom, does not intrude on the animal negotiating the rubble of ice shards. The directive from Borealis legal counsel is explicit. Observe only. Never intervene. There is disagreement, even now, on whether the figure shuffling along tide-washed gravel is truly Atka. The scars match, but the coat is ragged with summer mold. And the gate is stiffer than the databases recall. A message board devoted to Bear Watch 2050 inches argues frame by frame. But the documentary's final act refuses certainty, holding the shot at respectful distance. Waves lap in half-frozen slurry. The bear noses a strand of kelp, flicks her ears at the gulls shrieking overhead, then wades knee-deep into water unbecomingly dark. Cut to an apartment in Oslo. Months later, Dr. Victor Chen now lectures remotely. His holographic avatar projected into conference rooms from Johannesburg to Jakarta. On his desk sits the tuft of white fir cane gathered from torn insulation. Encased in resin, it looks less like DNA and more like memory fossilized mid-flutter. Chen rotates it absently while addressing a new dilemma: whether the genomic salvage mission launched after Atka's escape should proceed. Venture capital has already funded a lynx recombinant polar hybrid embryo meant to tolerate boreal forests. Chen's voice is almost gentle as he reminds viewers that new ice has not returned. Orbital shades remain political vaporware. And viable hunting platforms are rarer than blue moons. Cloning her genome for a habitat that exists only in investor slide decks, he says, is a kindness measured in marketing points, not moral weight. The film widens, tracing how Atka's jailbreak ricocheted around the planet. In Calgary, schoolchildren erect a cardboard dome on the playground, cut the roof open, and let paper snow swirl inside, a living diorama labeled "Freedom Greater Than Glass." In Beijing, an immersive VR pavilion once sponsored by Borealis quietly retires its "Meet Atka Live" exhibit. It reopens 2 weeks later rebranded as "Echoes of Ice: Lessons in Loss." In Svalbard, a startup markets personal home ice pods, mini cryo snow globes where customers can watch lab-grown lichens cling to sculpted styro ice. Owning a shard of the vanished pole. Orders double the first quarter. Madeleine Kane appears again, this time through grainy shoreline footage recorded on a body cam during her suspension hearings. She stands at the very seal hole where drones first documented Atka months earlier. No bear prints today, only brine rising and refreezing on the rim. Kane crouches, touches the ice, and speaks not to the tribunal but to the camera. To the record, to whoever might listen later. I was taught that veterinary oath, relieve suffering, preserve life. The dome checked those boxes on paper. But in the doorway of that escape hatch, I realized we were preserving an exhibit, not a life. A life needs agency, mystery, a chance to fail on its own terms. Maybe I signed her death warrant. Maybe I gave her back one genuine dawn. I had to live with that ambiguity. Night falls again on the Arctic coast. No artificial auroras this time, just the faintest smear of green that pulses briefly over the magnetic pole. A meager gift from a quiet sun. Here the documentary abandons the timeline, drifting instead into montage. Archival reels of early 20th century hunters gliding over sure ice. Children in 2020's classrooms gasping at their first VR aurora. Atka at 2 years old playing with a plastic buoy in the rehabilitation pool. The cracked safety glass after her final roar. The holographic bear cubs rendered for marketing decks that may never be funded now that the flagship attraction walks beyond purchase. A title card fades in. Inuit lore says the northern lights are stepping stones for souls seeking their way home. The camera returns to the shoreline just as the last usable light slips away. A dark shape stands halfway up the tide line, turned toward the horizon where a skein of new ice, thin as sugar glaze, has unexpectedly formed during an anomalous snap freeze. The bear steps onto it. The sheet flexes but holds. She advances again, slow, testing. 10 meters from open water she stops, lifts her head, and inhales a wind carrying nothing but cold and possibility. Foot by foot she continues until distance blurs her outline against the dusk. And then even the drone's thermal sensors cannot distinguish bear from flow. Body heat masking into the quickening freeze. Voiceover now barely more than breath. Perhaps she will starve. Perhaps she will find a stranded seal at the ice edge. Perhaps drifting currents will raft her onto a gravel bar where early spring berries survive and grizzly cousins roam. Whatever the ledger of probabilities, the equation no longer includes walls. It is written only in hunger, weather, instinct, and the mathematics of chance that governed every bear before we intervened. End credits begin to roll over silent images of empty dome corridors. Still flickering with emergency strobes nobody has bothered to replace. Lawsuits crawl through the fine print. Donations spike to conservation NGOs. A shareholder graph jitter bounces in the corner of a financial newsfeed. But the credits ignore them, choosing instead to scroll lines from Mary Oliver, from N. Scott Momaday, from an Inuit youth poem found scrawled on a greywater prefab barracks. May the night remember her smell. May the wind carve her name in ice too thin for maps. May we learn stories before we build cages. The last frame cuts back one final time to the sea, a fingernail of pale ice. The faintest paw print in its center, already disappearing under powder snow blown by honest wind, the kind no machine can replicate. No music swells, only the hiss of that wind across the microphone until signal falls to static and, at last, to necessary quiet.